Hi, and welcome to the first Pastured Hog webinar for Rodale Institute. I'm glad you guys are here. Just some housekeeping things. If we could give all questions in the chat form. I believe you guys have a chat box at the bottom where you can type questions. I won't be answering them throughout the presentation, but towards the end there should be time that I can go over some of the questions that I receive. So if we could do that, that would be great. Thank you. And there is my contact information on this first slide. My name is Shelby Dukes. I am the Animal Husbandry Coordinator at Rodale Institute. I have been here since the summer of 2016, I believe. And let's see. There we go. All right, so I'm going to hide myself until the end of the presentation for now. There we go. There we go. Alrighty, so today's agenda for the class, we're going to go over some of the introduction to Rodale Institute and who we are, and go over a little bit about the hog facility that we have here on site. We're going to cover some of the basic elements of pastured pork, and part of that is your pasture planning. So we're also going to cover some pasture planning throughout the seasons. And then to finish everything out, we're going to go over some of the research that we're conducting here at Rodale involving the pastured pork operation. There we go. So we are Rodale Institute. We are an organic research and education facility, or actually farm. We were founded in 1947 by J.I. Rodale. And being Rodale Institute and being mindful of organic practices and since we're talking about animals welfare practices, we built a hog facility in 2015. It was finished. And so here you can see a picture of our hog facility. Some keynotes to notice on this facility is how tall it is. It allows for great air movement, which gives the pigs high quality air. There's side curtains that can go down, there's doors that can open. It allows for a lot of cross air action and really circulates things. There's an overhead feeding system, so we can do automatic feeding to the different groups of piglets as we're raising them. There's automatic watering systems that are also freeze-proof. And all of these things contribute to lower labor than your normal pastured hog operations. And this gives you the overview of the blueprints of the facility. And so some key things to notice on this is that it's built of pens. And since it is basically just a room full of pens made up of gates, it's very adaptable. This barn model could be scaled and made bigger, or it could be made smaller. And as I mentioned, the gates, the design of the pens, which are basically gates, you can see the light blue lines, each represent a gate and how it could swing. The light blue archway is how the gates can swing. So you can see the facility, you can create larger pens, create smaller pens, create runways to move pigs in different directions. And it gives you really ease of access to the pigs and ability to adapt to different situations that might happen. And if you would like a high quality PDF of this blueprint, I can send that to you. Please just email me and I can get that to you. So here's another viewpoint of the hog facility. This gives you the viewpoint down the center alleyway. And the biggest pro of this facility is probably this alleyway. It allows you to hook up a trailer, back straight up to it. You can easily move pigs down the alleyway and onto the trailer. It makes loading out really easy and low stress on the pigs. So some other pros of this facility is the decreased labor, like I mentioned earlier. The overhead feeding system cuts down on a lot of labor. The watering systems are great. The ability to move pigs from pen to pen and around also saves you a lot of labor. It's hard to tell in this picture, but the back two doors, there's one in the back right and one on the back left. You can easily bring in a skid steer and clean out those outer alleyways of the pens. So again, you're saving yourself some labor. The biggest con to this facility is probably the fact that it is a permanent structure. It is in the ground, there's concrete. you can't exactly just pick it up and move it with you. So again, you have to figure out your situation and your environment and see if this is the best option for you. So moving off of our facility, let's see, some of the topics we were going to cover today on the basic elements of pastured pork that I'm going to talk about today. The first topic is going to be pigs, since they are, you know, the whole part of what you're doing. We're also going to go over different fencing systems, and we're going to go over planning your pastures through the different seasons. Here at Rodale, we use heritage breeds, and heritage breeds are the old breeds. A lot of them come from the 18 and 1900s, and there's not very many of them. And a great place to go and learn about all the different heritage breeds and which ones are critical or endangered or being watched is the Livestock Conservancy website. They have not only the pigs, but all of the different species of livestock. But these heritage breeds, they were designed and bred to be on pasture. The breeds were specifically bred and altered to live on the range and foraging and grazing. And so that's why we've chosen to use them, because they have that genetic ability to go out and forage. And so some of the heritage breeds we have here at Rodale, first up is the red wattle. This is one of our sows here. This is Petunia. You can see she's got a whole slew of piglets there cuddled up with her. But the red wattles are known for their hardiness. They're extremely hardy, independent, strong pigs, and they're also known for their foraging activity. This pig here, she's rarely ever in the barn. She's always out on pasture, foraging, rooting things up, finding things to eat. But she's also extremely athletic. If you look at her, she is a very clean and lean pig. And she's what we call our athlete of the farm. If you see her running in the barn, she's quick, she's mobile. She's not one that you see laying around very often. She's also the epitome of motherhood. You can see, as I mentioned, she's got a whole slew of piglets there. She has excellent weaning rates, excellent mom. Again, just a really great all-around pasture pig. The second heritage breed I was going to talk about today that we have at Rodale is the Gloucestershire Old Spot. You can see we've got two of them laying there side by side. They're both sows. And they're known for being docile, intelligent, and thrifty foragers. These are very easygoing, calm pigs. These are two of the best ones we have about getting in the pen and interacting with the piglets at an early age. They're great mothers, very, very cautious and careful with their piglets, but also great on pasture. You can see they've got those upturned noses and the floppy ears that protect their faces when they're outside. Again, great pigs on pasture, great mothering ability, very easygoing. We love working with the Gloucestershires. A third heritage breed that we have here at Rodale is the large black. And you can see she's the front one looking at the camera. This is, again, one of our sows. And the large blacks are known for being large. It's in their name, and it's definitely a characteristic of the breed. They have excellent foraging abilities as well as great mothering skills. Along with being cautious like the Gloucestershires, they also have more of a protective streak in them. They're excellent if you're planning on having piglets out in the pasture and not in a facility. They're extremely protective towards other animals, other pigs, but again, very easygoing animals. And she's another one that's frequently out in the pasture instead of in the barn. The fourth heritage breed that we have here at Rodale is the Tamworth. And you can see here, this is our Tamworth boar, and he's walking towards the camera. And he's, again, another long, lean, and athletic pig. They're strong and sturdy. They've got good, stable legs under them. And having good legs is vital for pastured pork. It allows them to cover the distance that they need to if you're sending them out to the far corners of different pastures or expecting them to move to find forage. You're not just placing them in a paddock and putting all the feed right in front of them. They have to move to get there. And so these guys are known for having those strong, sturdy legs and being able to carry them the distance to different parts of the pasture. These guys are also known as the bacon breed They tend to be very long from the back to the belly and provide a good deal of meat for bacon. And so those are the 4 different breeds that we have at Rodale. Again, all heritage breeds, all really old breeds from the 1900s that were designed and built to be out on pasture. And again, that's the primary reason that we're using them, is because they've been there, they've done that. That's what they were designed to do, unlike a lot of the modern pigs that you see, which have not been raised out on pasture and designed to do so. So now that we've learned some of the different breeds, another aspect of the pig that I wanted to touch on is that pigs are monogastrics. They're not like a cow. They are not like a sheep. Sheep and cows are ruminants, and pigs are monogastrics. They're more similar to humans. They have a single compartment stomach, and that vastly changes what they can process and how they process it. And so that's a key factor to remember when you're planning your pastures and planting and figuring out where and what you're going to graze them on. All right, so moving off from pigs, the next topic we were going to discuss was the fencing systems. If you're planning on having pigs out on pasture, you need to have a good fencing system designed and in place. So I'm going to touch on 3 main different types of fencing that there are out there for you. So the first one is a permanent perimeter fence, and we do have this at our hog facility. We have 8 acres dedicated for pasture, and that 8 acres is hard fenced in. So you can see there we've got these wooden posts in the ground. The outside has the hard paneled fencing, and the inside has electric wire, high tensile electric wire. And so that's one option. It's great. We use it as a safety net. It's got the perimeter of our pasture fenced in, and it definitely helps you sleep better at night knowing your pigs can't escape. I mean, we've got the hard exterior with the electric on the inside. And I wouldn't advise just having the hard exterior without the electric, because the pigs will root under it. They will push it. They will push their limits. You definitely need electric when you're dealing with pigs. So this, again, there's pros and cons to this. The pros are you sleep good at night, and it is bomb-proof, and it works really well for pigs. The downside is it's costly, it's a lot of labor, and it's permanent. You can't move it. And so what you can do inside of that or in place of that are 2 different things. The first option is this temporary mesh electric fencing. You can see it in the left side of the picture there. And so typically what it is you've got these push-in posts. You can see one of them there, and it's got the electric mesh fencing attached to it. And the pros to this fencing system is that it is temporary. You can pick it up and you can move it. It's still electric. It's highly visible to the pigs. If it's visible to the pigs, they're more likely to respect it because they can see it. Sometimes if you have issues with pigs, it's because they just can't see it. And so that is some of the pros to this fencing system. Some of the cons is it is cumbersome. You have to pick it up and carry it. If you've worked with this mesh electric fencing before, you know it tangles easy. It can be cumbersome. And since there is so much fencing there that's being electrified, you can easily lose charge through it being shorted out at the bottom, through tall, heavy pastures, or if the pigs root up soil on it, or if there's a cut in it somewhere, it can easily drop charge on you, which is the major con to that, along with being cumbersome to move around. But again, highly visible to the pigs. They can see it, they respect it, and it works pretty well for them. The third option, and it's a large option that we use here at Rodale, is using the temporary polywire fencing system. And you can see in this picture that we've got the orange temporary step-in post. And it's a little bit harder to see because of these wires, but we have polywire, and it's white, and it's got the electric wires running through it. And we've got it tied into that high tensile electric fence I mentioned earlier that runs the perimeter of our hog pasture. And we're jumping the current into that polywire. And here we've got 2 wires. You can see there's one about halfway up the pole and one couple inches up from the bottom of the pole. And when we're training piglets on fencing, which you do have to start extremely young, we'll start them on a couple different strands. And our rule of thumb with the pigs is start with the lowest wire being just below their chin, a second wire being at about eye level, because again, they need to be able to see it, and a third one being the top of their head or back level. And slowly we'll wean them down. So most of our breeders are on one single poly wire at about chin height. Some of our, 3 to 4 month old pigs are on 2 wires, like you see here, and our youngest piglets will be on sometimes 3 wires as they're being trained on it. This temporary system with the poly wire could also be done with T-posts and the plastic insulators that you put on them. But T-posts require a little bit more work to put in the ground, but they can be variably temporary. You can pull them back up easy enough, more so than these wooden posts with the permanent vents on the exterior. So that's basically your third option of fencing. And these can be mixed and mingled. So you could use, again, how we're doing the hard exterior fence with the poly wire in the inside, or if I have a troublesome group of piglets that I'm trying to get trained on electric fence, I'll bring in that mesh fencing and set up within the perimeter again. I definitely think mixing and matching some of these different systems is very useful for the pigs. So the main topic, planning your pastures. You can see here is an overview of our farm. You can see that center building is our hog facility. And you can even kind of see the perimeter of different pastures and paddocks we've had set up through the past, and the pigs have grazed on it. And it's really great to see these aerial overview shots of your farm. I believe this was just pulled from Google Earth or Google Maps satellite view or something like that. And that's a really great tool to use if you're trying to plan your own pastures. You could easily go online, get an overview of your farm, and visually see what you have to work with and where you want things to go, and ease of movement of the pigs. If you're moving them paddock to paddock around your farm, it gives you a great idea of how to logically move them and put it on paper and plan out what's going to be where. And you definitely need to be planning seasons ahead of time. For us here, if we're thinking in the fall about what we're going to be grazing in the spring and the summer and the fall, and sometimes you even need to think a couple years ahead if you're going to be rotating through different crops in the same field. So here's another sort of aerial photo of our pasture. This is kind of the front of the hog facility looking back over the side pasture. I believe this is the east pasture. And you can see there's, in the middle, kind of an open bare area with a whole bunch of orange posts. And those were used as alleyways. So we've got 2 alleyways set up, and the bottom left corner, you can kind of see there's this lush green plant material that we were most likely about to start grazing them on. And we use these kind of sacrifice lane areas to intensively strip graze certain sections of the paddock. And so we set up these alleyways, and then you can maneuver the pigs through certain sections of the field and get a more intensively efficient grazing over the crops. So you can see we had 2 alleyways set up there, and moving them either right or left out of the alleyway into the 2 different paddocks that we had set up. And again, even on the other side of that middle paddock, you can see there was a further back paddock that we were doing the same thing with. There's a runway going out the back of the barn. And this is where that overview shot of your field comes in handy. You can plan your alleyways and your runways and how you're going to get your pigs to the different pastures. And if you don't have the facility and you're using different shelters or hut systems, again, how you're going to maneuver everything throughout the field and plan your grazing sequence. So the first season of the year, everyone's all excited. It's spring, but again, you need to think about this ahead of time. So more than likely, you're going to be thinking about it in the fall. That's when you could be planting things such as winter triticale, wheat, rye, or barley. Those are some common things that we'll plant in the fall to do some really early spring grazing on. And these options can be seeded at about 3 bushels per acre, till or no till. You could also mix in some Austrian winter peas. We'll do about a 50-50 mix seed at 120 pounds per acre at the pea setting. We often open the seed cups to allow more flow. However, the peas may winter kill, so that's also something to think about. And here's some photo examples of things that we've done. This is, anyway, this is some triticale that we had planted the previous fall. You can see we're doing an early spring grazing on it. I believe this was about March when we started grazing them. And you can see there's orange fence posts. We only gave them an allotted amount. And then about a month later, we moved them into a new section. And you can see the difference from March to April, how much that triticale has really grown. You can barely see the backs of the pigs. And again, we're small section grazing this, trying to intensively capture as much as we can from the different pastures. Typically, we'll graze it down to a couple inches off the ground and then allow for regrowth. And you can see, I believe there are some peas mixed into this as well. You can see them down in the lower corner of the picture. And again, there's another picture of the triticale that we had planted that they're grazing. And these were a large black cross piglet that we were raising. So moving into later spring and almost getting into summer, some other things you could think about planning to graze are field peas, oats, spring barley, or triticale. You can use the same seeding setup that I talked about in that previous slide. You could also establish some legumes for perennial pasture. Some things that we commonly use are the alfalfa, the ladino, and the red clovers. We've even used the any of the Alice whites. We've definitely had good luck with the white clovers. You can also add a forage brassica if desired, such as rape, kale, or collards. And this can be planted at about 12 to 15 pounds per acre and evenly mix it and inoculate it. You could also add some grass or chicory. Those are some other things you could play around with. So this is a pasture we had. It was a combination of small grains, field peas, rape, and kale. And those are two of our breeders out there. So you can see just how tall and lush that pasture was. See the peas and the grains. They definitely go for the peas pretty well. And there's a close-up of that pasture composition, just all the different variety in there. Being a monogastric, such as a human, they do enjoy that dietary variety. If you feed them the same exact thing or a very similar pasture mix, they do get bored. They're very intelligent animals. They appreciate the variety. They get bored easily. And so keeping them interested and intrigued in the pasture is definitely part of it. They enjoy the variety and they do well with it. So here's another picture of a pasture composition we did. This was basically mainly clovers. You can see we've got that that red wattle sow out there with her piglets. And this is really a picture of an ideal situation. I put this picture in here because I wanted you to observe the sow's out on pasture. All of her piglets are out there with her. I mean, those are young piglets. They're probably 2-ish weeks old and they're already out on pasture, eating the clover, investigating, watching mom. And this is exactly what you want to see if you're raising pastured pigs from a sow. That sow is who is going to teach those piglets to go out on pasture and graze and forage and find things to eat. If your sow's not out there teaching those piglets, she's really not fully doing her job in teaching them. So again, this is the ideal situation that you want to see of a sow and piglets out on good pasture. So as you progress into summer, some more things you can think about are pearl millet, cowpeas, grazing corn, and alfalfa. You can plant the millet when soil warms to about 60 degrees. Plant it at about 8 to 12 pounds per acre. Another mix we've done is the cowpeas and millet mix. It's about 25 pounds per acre with the seed cups open. The grazing corn, also known as the tillering corn, planted at about 32,000 seeds per acre. Again, this is also known as tillering corn. It tillers really well, provides a lot of shade in the summer heat. Graze alfalfa from the spring planting if you decided early on in the spring to plant that. It's kind of a judgment call. Sometimes we've had it where the pigs will graze the alfalfa off well enough that it'll regrow on its own after you pull the pigs back out. But definitely go out and take a walk and look at it and see. You might need to mow it back off to get it to regrow like it needs to get another grazing out of it. So I mentioned that tillering corn. So here's some pictures of the corn that we grew this past season. And you can see on the left there, that's our large black sow walking out. And we had divvied this up into sections for different groups of pigs to graze. And you can see the picture on the right, that was probably a couple hours later. If you've been around pigs grazing corn before, it's very exciting to see. The sows go out and they wander their way into the cornfield, and all of a sudden you'll hear this crashing sound, and it's the sow laying down and knocking over the corn stalks. And then they'll get back up and start pretty much shredding the stalk that they just knocked over. I wouldn't advise putting young feeder piglets out there unless you turn a sow out first to knock some of it down. This young feeder piglets didn't quite understand how to knock it over, and they weren't big enough to really rip it down. But we turned them in for cleanup after the sows had kind of knocked a bunch of it over, and they did a really great job cleaning up. They just didn't quite understand how to knock it over at first. Some good things about the corn, though, is, again, it mimics a natural habitat for them. They commonly are used in woodlots, and this really does mimic a woodlot for them. It creates shade, it offers coverage, it creates an escape from the heat. When we had the corn and were grazing the pigs in it, the pigs rarely ever came in the barn. They pretty much went off feed. I think the only time they came in was to drink water, and then they'd pretty much go back outside. They would create huge nests with all the plant matter out there. I would pretty much have to go out into the field and do a head count and make sure everyone was still accounted for out there. But the pigs definitely enjoyed it. As I mentioned, all that plant matter, you can see this red wattle sow again with a huge belly. I believe she farrowed a couple days later after this picture. And she's got a huge mouth wad full of corn stalk material, and she was creating this huge nest that she later had her piglets in. So it does create a lot of materials that they can use to do their nests. Their natural instinct is that they are nesters. They create these huge nests even when they're not about to farrow. If you go into our barn now, they've got these, the corners of each pen, they've kind of got like a huge nest they sleep in. So nesting is a natural thing for them, and giving them the materials to nest is vital. So the corn definitely did that for them. So moving out of summer and heading into fall and winter, a common planting concoction that we've used the past couple seasons has been radish, beets, turnips, and sometimes some oats and wheat will get in there as well. Any type of mix of brassica with small grains works really well. You can mix the larger seeds in the same hopper. And seed at oats, wheat setting 2.5 bushels per acre. Add the beets and radishes at about 8 pounds per acre. And plant the turnips with small seed hopper at 2 to 3 pounds per acre, and then broadcast at 5 pounds per acre. Again, photos speak way more words. So here's the photo progression of these radish, turnip, and beets. So this was seeding in about July. As you can see, the plants are just starting to pop out of the ground. And we attempt to do this normally mid-July-ish is when we're normally shooting to get this in the ground. And you can see by October the nice growth that we've got going on here. You can see everything's really starting to pop up. It's nice and green. Everything's pretty evenly growing out there. You can see this is straight out the back of the barn. And in November, we can start grazing it. You can see that young group of large black piglets. This was our Tamworth boar, the first year we had him, so he's a youngster there. And you can see all the different plants that's mixed in there between the oat crops, the radish, the beets, and they really went to town on that. And in an ideal world, if you get this crop in early enough and the weather cooperates with you, you can get an early flash October grazing off of it and just kind of graze off the top green parts. And again, you need to move them through quick because the plants are still a little young. And if you pull them out quick enough, you can get them back in November and do a really thorough grazing off of it. What's great about this is they originally target a lot of that green top plant material in the beginning. However, once you get a good heavy frost that fall, all of the sugars go to the root underneath the soil, and that's when the pigs will actually start rooting up the soil and going for that root mass underneath the ground. And they do a lot of your tilling for you with this crop. This is definitely one of the crops that we plant, and we see the most even tillaging from the pigs. Another option, if you have it, here at Rodale, we do have a large apple orchard. This past season was the first year that we actually got the pigs up there to graze off the dropped apples in the fall and into winter. So I believe we got the pigs up there in early October and grazed them until about a week or two before Christmas, I believe. You can see here they're in the snow. Up in the orchard, since we didn't have that hard perimeter fence, we did use the mesh electric fencing system. You can see it's kind of in front of them there. Some key notes, if you're going to apple graze, is that these are very old established trees. These are not young trees. They've been there, very long time, very old apple orchard established trees. You wouldn't want to put them in with young trees that are still getting established in the ground. Again, we were also moving these guys extremely quickly. Our orchard is kind of broken into small blocks and squares of trees. And so the pigs were concentrated on each block. And then every other day we were moving them forward into the next block. And so they were moving every other day for the most part. And we were also offering them mobile temporary shelter in the form of a mobile A-frame. So you can see there with the snow, they're all pig piled into the A-frame shelter, cuddling for warmth. They were also getting daily rations of feed. We were going out and feeding them 2 to 3 times a day, different rations, depending on weather and growth rate. So they were getting feed additives as well while they were out in the orchard. Again, one of the key aspects to grazing them in the orchard is moving them quickly to prevent damage to the trees. We were definitely monitoring them on a close basis to make sure that they were not doing any damage out there. Alrighty. And so moving forward, we definitely have a lot of research going on here at Rodale, and we have recently started doing research with the pastured hog operation. The building has definitely been vital to doing this research. Again, that alleyway makes our life so much easier. You can see in this picture here that we've acquired a scale. That is what this green apparatus in the middle here is. And it works similar to a chute system. There's doors on both ends. You can open it, close it. It's got a visual scale reader on the top of it that gives us the final reading of their weight. And the scale has been huge for the pastured pork research. We've been weighing multiple different groups on a weekly basis, tracking their weight gains, and finally putting numbers to what we've been doing. The scale was just purchased this past summer, and between the facility and the scale, we've been greatly moving forward in the pastured hog operation. So some of the questions we're investigating. I always say whenever we talk about the hogs, there's the basic 5 questions that we always get regarding pastured hog operations. One of those questions is how much pasture are the pigs consuming? And so yeah, that first question that we always get is how much pasture are the pigs consuming? Other questions are how much feed is the pasture saving you? You know, how much pasture are they consuming and how does that equal out to feed? Is it really saving you feed? Some other questions is what is the stocking rate for pigs on pasture? How frequently should the pigs be moved to new paddocks? And how are you minimizing land degradation? So those are the key questions we're frequently asked. And there's many layers to our research operation that we will be doing this upcoming season to try and start answering those questions. So some of the research data that we collected from this past season of 2017 with our research scale. This past season, we had 5 different groups of piglets. For the most part, they were all individual litters. Group 5 was a collaborated 2 litters together to make that group of 17. So you can see below is some of the data that we were collecting. There's the how old were they when we first started weighing. Typically, we're trying to get that first weighing right after they're weaned. Sometimes it happens, sometimes it doesn't. That first group was 11 weeks, primarily just because that was right around when we got the scale. So you can see most of the other groups were, their first weighing was right around when they were weaned. And a good column to look at off of this graph is that last average column, or row, or whatever that is. And that kind of gives you a basic number of everything off of their rate of gain per pound, the percent rate of gain, how much they weighed when they finished, their weight when they were weaned, or the weight that they were at when we first weighed them, I guess you could say, since group 1 was a little bit later. How long we measured each group. And something to remember is group 5 in this chart is still currently on the farm. So we are currently continuing to take data on them. But it seems to be typically around 25-ish weeks is the average of how long we're collecting this data. And these guys were each weighed on a weekly basis. That's another good thing to know. So this is kind of the graph of the weights that we've been taking. See the graph on the left is the average weight per group. And you can see they're all steadily climbing at a pretty consistent rate. Group 4, that green line, is the group that was up in the orchard. So you can kind of see around week 24, 25 is when they came back to the facility in December. So you can see that they actually kind of dropped off and weighed a little bit and then went back up. The graph on the right is their percentage of gain. And so that's the percent that they gained on a weekly basis. As you can see, even though on the left that they were gaining, like constantly gaining weight, they weren't necessarily gaining it at a consistent rate. You can see most of these lines are all over the place. We're not exactly sure why that is, but we're hoping with the layers of research that we're adding this upcoming season will help us begin to answer those questions. So here's that overview again that I had showed you previously of the hog pastures. And you can see there that we've got 2 different blocks highlighted and filled in with color. And this is, for example, a pasture that we would graze pigs on. These are, in fact, 2 different pastures that we graze pigs on. And we color coordinated them just to show that this is what we're expecting the data for this upcoming season to look like. This is using spatial data. We've got the actual visual of the paddocks overview, and we're hoping to compare the color coordinated blocks and use it to compare whether it's biomass data, consumption data, feed conversion ratio data, weight gain data, grain inputs, pasture inputs. There's really an endless amount of data that we could apply to this. But just to give you an idea of some of the things we could be coming up with over the next year. So some of the plans I keep mentioning for this upcoming season with research, we have 2 different pastures that we've begun setting up. of 2 different mixes, completely different plants and composition. And the plan is to intensively graze the 2 different styles of paddocks intensively with separate groups of piglets. And those piglets will be limited to that pasture composition throughout the entire time that we're grazing and finishing them. During that period of time, we'll be tracking their weights like we had been doing before, tracking paddock size. They will be in small strip grazing, so we'll be tracking the different size, the time that they're in each section, taking biomass samples before and after each grazing of the different sections, along with doing exclusion sections. And our hypothesis is that there will be differences depending on the pasture composition and whether those differences occur at specific times, seeing how their digestive tract changes, whether it's allowing them to take certain nutrients from different plants better than others, and going forward with the data that we receive from that project. And so in conclusion, just to go over some of the data that we covered today, here at Rodale we use heritage breeds. They're a great option for use on pasture because of their genetic history of foraging on land. There's lots of options. Again, if you start researching them, research their history and what their pros and cons are, and pick the breeds that work best for your environment and your situation. Just because those 4 work good for us doesn't mean they'll necessarily be the best ones for your operation. There are many different fencing systems that can be customized to your operation. Again, I showed you 3. Those are the 3 basic ones that we're using here. However, there might be different styles, different systems that might work better for you. Don't be afraid to trial and error the different options out there as far as fencing goes. It is a key factor in your pastured hog operation. Pastured equals fencing. You have to be able to contain and manipulate and move your pigs in the fashion that you want to. Like I just showed you, using Google Earth or Google Satellite View is a great way to help plan grazing seasons by offering an overview of the land available. I mean, I showed you 2 or 3 different pictures of how we had used Google Earth or satellite to do the overhead view and really break down into the different paddocks and helping us plan the different planting seasons and grazing seasons that are coming up. And going off of our research can be done on your own farm. Keeping track of feeding records and pasture movements can help make production more efficient on your own farm. Records are a key part of farming. We keep feed records, pasture records, planting records. If you're farrowing on your farm, keep records of your sow, keep records of your litter sizes, and all of that great information. And it'll help you make informed decisions later on. And also be on the lookout for the ongoing pastured pork research that we have going on here. As I said, the facility was built in 2015 and is a huge segue for us to begin doing intensive pork research. And along with the purchase of the scale this past season, we're excited for the research that's coming up. So definitely keep in touch and be on the lookout for everything coming up. Speaking of coming up, we have 2 upcoming classes at Rodale. Pastured Hogs Workshop. We have one on May 5th and we have one on November 3rd. They're both 1 to 5. And when I say workshop, I mean you will actually be seeing the hog facility, going out into the pastures. This is a picture from one of our classes last year. And we really do give you the workshop experience. You get out, you get to see the watering systems, the feeding systems, the pasture diversity, our different fencing systems, all of the different breeds. We have piglets. It's a great experience to come and see everything in person. So definitely try to take advantage of one of those workshops if you can. To sign up, you can go to our website as well. And if you have extremely specific questions that we don't have time to cover today, or that I'm unable to answer fully, you can contact any of these people below. My contact information is there. Ross Duffield, who is our farm manager, his information is listed there as well. He would be a great one to contact with extremely specific planting or pasture management questions. There's also Rick Carr, our compost specialist, who has been working with us on the pastured hog research. His contact information is below. And I believe I have a lot of questions that are popping up. So let's see if I can answer these. All right. All right, I'm going to read through some of these questions real quick, and then we'll start answering them. I think I found all of them. Okay. Okay. So to start going through some of these questions, do you ever give additional feed when on pasture other than the orchard? Yes. So our sows are on daily rations of feed. They get hand fed once to twice a day. And that just kind of goes off of body score composition, depending on how much we actually feed them. All of the feeder piglets right now have ad lib access to feed, which means they have constant access throughout the day. So all of our pigs do get feed in addition to the pasture. Next question. How many pigs will the new facility hold? Currently, we have 4 breeding sows, 2 breeding boars, and we have, on average, finishing between 70 and 80 pigs a year. We do about 2 litters per year from each sow, so that ends up being 8 litters. Typically, we have a spring farrowing and a fall farrowing, or late summer, early fall farrowing. We try to have our last litter born normally by Thanksgiving, and then our first litter of the season born early March, just to kind of cut out that winter rough season on the piglets. Can I use any type of pig for pasture? As I mentioned before, we use all heritage breeds, which can be, you can find a list of them on that Livestock Conservancy website. We prefer the heritage breeds because of their genetic background and ability to do well on pasture. A lot of the modern day pigs weren't bred for that. They were bred to be inside in confinement. So in my experience, they don't always do as well. How do you move the A-frame that was in the orchard picture? Can it be lifted or do you use a tractor? So the A-frame is on skids. The outside 2 edges have long boards, kind of like a ski. And what we'll do is actually hook a chain to it with either a tractor or the farm truck and basically drag it and pull it. You do want to be careful when you're moving it in the winter though. With the pigs, they can root up soil inside the shelter, and then once the soil freezes can become an obstruction. So you do have to be a little bit careful with it, but for the most part, they work really well. The pigs really enjoy them. Okay. Are your pastures irrigated? Our pastures here are currently not irrigated. So far, we haven't had an issue with that, but we'll see how it goes in the future and if that needs to be something we look into. Do you feed any hay in the winter? We don't necessarily feed hay. We have fed the wrapped baleage before. There are times in the summer where the pigs can't keep up quick enough with the spring growth of the pasture. So we have cut and wrapped baleage and then fed it to them in the winter. They will eat it. They obviously prefer the grain, but when the pastures are pretty slim and they're used to eating pastures, they will eat the baleage. With the pigs, I do tend to be extremely picky on the baleage. If there's any type of spoilage or mold on it, I typically don't feed it to them. I would definitely be more picky with the pig stomachs than I would with a cow. Do you offer minerals-free feed? Plus, do you offer grain while pigs are on pasture? Yes, the pigs do get feed on the pasture. It's in the barn, so they do have to go in and out of the barn to get the feed in the pasture. The minerals, we do have minerals mixed into their feed. We've worked with a couple different nutritionists to figure out mineral concoctions that are in there. Do pigs have free access to the barn while grazing? Are there any results on weight gain on perennial pasture? So the pigs have 24/7 access to the pasture and the facility at all times. We haven't yet started locking them out or locking them in. The only time we'll lock them in is during extreme weather conditions. But for the most part, they have 24/7 access. We've toyed around with the idea with locking them out for periods of time during the day. Pigs are extremely routine animals. And one of our options we've thought about doing is creating a routine for them, such as being fed in the morning, kicking them outside for a couple hours, bringing them back in at lunch and feeding them, kicking them back out, and so forth, and getting them in that habit of eating grain and eating pasture and eating grain and eating pasture. Any results on Let's see. Sorry, I keep getting questions. So I have to keep reading through them. Thank you for your patience. Have you experimented with any corn silage in the winter? We have not currently tried any corn silage yet. Most of what we've tried in the winter outside of feed has all been the wrapped baleage. Let's go to the next one. Best time of year to first introduce pigs onto the farm. Most people that I know that do so with pig farming, you can do farrow to finish, which is where you're breeding your own pigs and then finishing them on site and selling them. Or you can do basically a finishing farm where you purchase in weaned piglets and take them to finishing weight and then send them. For here, we're doing farrow to finish, but for a lot of people, if you've never raised pigs before, but it's something you want to get into, probably purchasing weaners and then taking them to finishing weight is your best option. And if you're going to do that, most people that do the finishing operation get the pigs in mid-late spring and then throughout the summer. For us, finishing a pig takes about 6 to 7 months, so they'll be about 6 to 7 months old when they're finished. So if you're getting pigs in the early mid-spring area, that takes you through, about fall when you're finishing them. You wouldn't really want to be getting them in the summer because then you would be running into the winter months. So most people, if you're doing finishing pigs, you'll get them in the spring and take them through the fall. We have a pasture that is slightly wet at times of the year. Can pig pasture here? I would say that depends. With good management, possibly. I would advise moving them through it quickly and doing small sections. Pigs definitely can cause compaction and wear and tear on the ground, and if it's wet, even more so. But I would say if you're familiar with pig farming and can manage them properly, it can be done. Getting something established in there or having proper drainage systems is probably key. How much did the facility cost to build? I believe with all of the bells and whistles, which includes the exterior fencing, the feeding systems, the concrete work, and everything that you saw that was in there, including the exterior fencing and groundwork to level and build the facility, I believe it was between 150 and 180,000. Yes.
I'm sorry, what?
Cost
Of
the building?
250,000
Oh, I thought it was. Anyway.
approximately.
Okay.
5 minutes.
Okay. They keep coming. Do you plan on rotational planting of the pig pastures for crop production or using the pigs to improve the soil of existing tilled fields? So currently the pastures that were set up within that hard perimeter fencing is used only for pastured pork production and research. They will not actually be used for crop production or harvesting besides hay and baleage that will be going back into the barn in the system there. Primarily the pigs are there to see the long-term effect of pastured pigs when managed properly and to learn how to manage them. And everything that's being planted in there is specifically for the pigs to forage and graze and gain nutrients from. Have you followed up any pastured poultry in paddocks after the hogs? Yes, we do this quite frequently. And we are hoping and believe that it's helping with parasite control as well. We do graze. We have multiple flocks of laying hens here, and we also raise broiler chickens. And we do try to intensively incorporate them through the pastured hog fields at least once or twice a year. And there is a designated back corner that we normally grow our turkeys and finish our turkeys on. Again, you have to be careful with the turkeys and chicken crossover. So we do have a dedicated turkey corner, and then the rest of it's all covered by the broilers and the layers once or twice a year. Methods for deworming. That's a fun one. Being organic, we are extremely limited in what we can use for that. Again, we try to incorporate the chickens heavily to mitigate the soil element of it. And definitely the chickens help break up the manure and they'll pick through. And most of our feed is all very coarse and has cracked corn in it. So it gives the chickens incentive to pick through the manure even more and break it apart and scatter it. As far as actual methods for deworming, I guess our biggest one that we've been using is different concoctions of the diatomaceous earth, the black walnut shell, garlic. I believe there's like a ginger in there sometimes, and incorporating it into the feed for the different feeder piglets. More so in ones that we suspect might be more prone, but it's an ongoing battle that we're still trying to figure out.
Minutes.
For the black walnuts, basically it's kind of a powder that's ground down that we purchase and mix in with the diatomaceous earth and the garlic and a couple other elements, if that helps. Someone asked, how much grain do you feed per day? Again, it depends on the pig and the groups. The feeder piglets have the ad lib constant access to feed. The sows and the breeders, it depends. In the summer, a lot of times they're getting about in total 3 pounds per day. When they're late in gestation, close to farrowing, and especially when they're lactating and feeding all of those piglets, we increase it anywhere from 15 to 20 pounds of feed per day. Going again off of body composition, if we have a sow that's had a large litter in number, we'll obviously up the feed a lot more because we know that she's going to be milking a lot more fat off to feed those piglets. What kind of health practices do you use? We covered wormers and castration. We do castrate our piglets. We do not raise them to be boars. They're all castrated into barrows. We're typically doing this at 7 days. And we're doing the typical method that you'll see at most pig farms.
One more question.
Yeah. Keep having to switch back and forth. Actually, I think I got them all. Alrighty. Well, I think I got most of the questions. I'm sorry if I missed them. If it was extremely vital, please email me and I can do my best to answer it over email. Thank you guys for tuning in today. Again, there's that last slide that has all of our contact information. If you have any more detailed questions, be happy to answer them over email.
Stop sharing.